The year is 1550, the exact center of the world map. We are in that eerie hour just before dawn. The dense fog hanging over the Golden Horn fills your lungs. The air is cold, a mixture of dampness, coal smoke, and the infamous stench of the harbor mud. Right now, you are standing in the quietest spot in Istanbul. But do not let this silence fool you. Behind these massive walls, the heart of an empire beats. This is not just a marketplace. This is a colossal labyrinth of 60 streets, 4,000 shops, and countless secrets. This is the Grand Bazaar. When the sun rises, the ritual begins. The gates open with a thunderous noise, but no one rushes inside. Merchants, apprentices, masters, they all gather at the prayer square. The silence breaks, hands are raised, an oath of honesty is taken. Because in here, a merchant's word is worth more than a signed contract. If you had opened your eyes here in the 16th century, the first sound you heard would not be the clinking of coins, but this prayer. But the moment the prayer ends, the chaos begins. And in that instant, goods and people from the four corners of the world collide. Imagine the smell hitting your nose, the sharp scent of cinnamon and cloves rising from the spice bazaar, merging with the heavy, sour stench of processed leather from the tanneries nearby. The perfume of a Venetian merchant battles with the sweat of a porter. Here, everything is for sale. The rarest silks of the Silk Road, coffee from Yemen, furs from Russia. But surviving in this labyrinth isn't just about selling good wares. You must know the rules. If you weigh incorrectly, your end will be disastrous. If you steal, you will never leave these walls. So, what happens when the sun goes down? When the gates are locked, who remains inside? How are millions in gold protected without cameras, without electricity, without police? In this video, you will witness not just history, but the survival guide of an Ottoman merchant. What did they eat? What did they fear? And most importantly, how did this massive machine run for centuries without failing? Welcome to the heart of the empire. Before you touch that silk fabric in the bazaar, stop and think. How did that fabric get here? There was no Amazon Prime. There were no cargo planes. There was only a deadly 6-month march against nature and bandits. The backbone of this logistical operation was not a technological marvel, but a biological machine, the camel. A dromedary camel could walk for 10 days without water, carrying 250 kilos on its back. Ottoman logistics were built on these beasts. A caravan sometimes consisted of 1,500 camels. This meant a walking city. For a piece of porcelain to travel from China to Istanbul in one piece was an operation as risky as sending a rocket to the moon today. But even camels must rest. To keep trade alive, the Ottoman Empire established the world's most advanced highway service network, the Caravanserais. These were not hotels. These were fortresses in the middle of nowhere. The system was incredible, whether Muslim or Christian, rich or poor. The moment you entered the caravanserai, you were a guest of the state. Food, a bed, and fodder for your animals were free for 3 days. Why did the state do this? Out of charity? No, because if trade stopped, taxes stopped. The empire stopped. But the moment you stepped out of the thick walls of the caravanserai, you returned to the wild world. 16th century Anatolia was not a romantic place. It was the era of the Salali rebellions. The roads were full of bandits waiting to loot caravans. A merchant's greatest fear was not losing his goods, but being sold as a slave. The state established the Derbences, the pass guards, to counter this. These were special units living in the most dangerous mountain passes, tasked solely with protecting the roads. For a merchant, seeing a Derbensi flag in the distance was like spotting land in the ocean. Yet on every piece of silk reaching Istanbul, there was an invisible stain of blood. And the end of a journey that lasted months. Constantinople. But you couldn't just waltz into the city. At the docks of Eminönü, the customs emin would greet you. Every sack was open, every spice weighed. Only after the state took its share were those goods finally transported to the cool vaults of the Grand Bazaar. That porcelain bowl from China was now ready to adorn a pasha's table. Most people think the Grand Bazaar is just a collection of shops lined up side by side. A fatal mistake. This structure is actually designed as a fortress. And like every fortress, it has an inner keep. The Ottomans called it the Bedesin. This is the Sevahir Bedesin, the place where the empire's most precious treasures were kept. Look at the thickness of these walls. Exactly 2 meters. Why? Because in the 16th century, thieves didn't walk through the door. They tried to bore through the walls. But piercing these stones is harder than stopping an army. Here, even sunlight enters by permission. Windows are placed high above, specifically so that no one from the outside can peer in or catch a glimpse of the glitter inside. So where did the millions of gold coins, diamonds, and silks go when the sun went down? There were no banks, no alarm systems. The answer lies beneath your feet. Under every shop lies a hidden mazen, known only to the shop owner. These are the ancestors of modern bank vaults. These underground chambers were designed not just against theft, but against Istanbul's greatest nightmare, fire. Even if the apocalypse broke out outside, even if the bazaar surrendered to flames, the wealth in these underground chambers would remain untouched. When the sun sets, the Grand Bazaar transforms into a completely different world. It is no longer the kingdom of merchants, but of them, the passmans, the night watch. These men were the most trusted, yet most feared men of the empire. The rules were absolute. Once night fell, the gates would not open, even if the Grand Vizier himself arrived. If they found anyone hiding inside, there were no questions asked. The security of the bazaar came before mercy. This is why, for centuries, this bazaar could neither be robbed nor conquered. This was not just a place of trade. This was trust, built of stone and iron. Let's say you are in the 16th century. Your pockets are heavy with gold, and you want to open a jewelry shop in the Grand Bazaar. The answer is simple: impossible. In this bazaar, money is not as powerful as you think. To open a shop here, what you need is not wealth, but a Gedik. A Gedik is the right to operate a shop, a license, and their numbers are strictly limited. Unless a master dies or retires, the Gedik does not become available. And even if it does, it is not sold to a wealthy outsider. That right belongs to the most senior journeyman, who has rotted away in that shop for years waiting for his turn. The journey begins in childhood. When families brought their children to a master, they would utter that famous, chilling phrase, "His flesh is yours, his bones are mine." This meant absolute obedience. For years, apprentices would only sweep floors, serve tea, and clean the master's tools. They learned not just the craft, but patience, morality, and silence. Years later, if the journeyman proved himself, the great day would arrive, the girding of the pestimol. This was the graduation ceremony of the bazaar. The guild sheik would tie a ceremonial apron around his waist with prayers, granting him the title of master. He was now an equal member of this brotherhood. But the most shocking rule of this organization was not competition, but solidarity. In the modern world, companies try to destroy each other. Here, the exact opposite happened. You may have heard of the famous Sifta rule. If a master made his first sale of the morning, if he had made his Sifta, he would not accept the second customer. He would gently say, "I have made my first sale, but my neighbor has not. Please buy from him." This was not stupidity. This was a survival strategy, because they knew if their neighbor fell, the balance of the bazaar would break, and the fortress would collapse from within. They were not rivals. They were sailors on the same ship. Silks are beautiful, but they do not protect you. An empire survives not by silk, but by steel. In the back alleys of the bazaar, near the Sandal Bedessen, the air smells of gunpowder and iron. This is the arms market. And the most famous product sold here is the yatagan. This is not an ordinary sword. It is an inversely curved killing machine. Unlike straight European swords, it is designed to use gravity to shatter helmets in a single blow. Often, inscribed upon it are the words, "There is no victor but Allah." Before marching to war, Janissaries would come here to choose the steel to which they would entrust their lives. But in the 16th century, warfare was changing. The bazaar was selling not just swords, but the weapon of the future, the musket. Ottoman rifles were not just weapons, they were works of art. Their stocks were inlaid with mother-of-pearl and ivory. For a soldier, this weapon was more valuable than his wife, because on the battlefield, it was the only thing that would not betray him. Steel saves lives, but gold defines status. In the very heart of the bazaar, behind the thickest walls, lie the jewelers. This is the most expensive square footage on earth. The emerald necklaces worn by women in the harem, the diamonds on the sultan's turbans, they all pass through these tiny shops. The masters of this craft were usually Armenian and Jewish artisans. In their hands, through the zurnizan technique, gold and steel would merge. A raw stone would transform into an empress's crown. Here, trust is not on paper, but in the eyes. Diamonds worth millions would change hands without a contract, with only a word of honor. So how were such precious stones transported through roads full of bandits? The answer: camouflage. A merchant's turban was not just a hat, it was a walking safe. In secret pockets sewn into their sashes, they could carry enough diamonds to buy a country. That simply dressed old man you saw in the bazaar might have been the richest man in the empire. Now, close your eyes and open your ears. You are entering the west wing of the market, the street of Coppersmiths. Speaking here is impossible. You must scream. Hundreds of hammers strike metal plates at the exact same time. This is the sound of Istanbul's industrial heartbeat. A soldier's helmet, the palace's cauldron, a dervish's bowl. They are all born from this noise and sweat. When you escape the noise and head east, an invisible wall greets you. Scent. In the 16th century, daily hygiene was not like the modern world. The sewage systems were primitive. But the bazaar created its own perfume to mask these odors. This is the Spice Bazaar, the empire's pharmacy. Black pepper from India, coffee from Yemen, and the rose of Thrace. But the most valuable of all, musk and amber. These scents were not just for vanity. They were used as a shield against the plague and disease. Merchants would walk around with cloves stuffed in their nostrils to avoid breathing in the foul air. As you walk through the scents, look around you. This is not just a place for Turks. This is like the United Nations of the ancient world. In that corner, a Turkestani merchant with slanted eyes bargaining for silk. Next to him, a Venetian trying to sell Murano glass, and an Anatolian porter walking with 100 kilos on his back, carrying goods for them both. It is normal not to understand the language you hear. Greek, Italian, Persian, Arabic, and Turkish. They all blend together to form the bazaar's own language, a lingua franca. Here, you don't need words to agree. Eyes, fingers, and numbers. In this universal language, everyone can speak. You have seen the silks, the spices, and the gold. But these were not the most expensive goods sold in 16th century Istanbul. Right next to the bazaar, in the slave market, what was being sold was human life. This place was known as the Avrit Pazari, or the Han of captives. Here, not money, but destiny changed hands. The system was cold-blooded and ruthless. Just as one would check the quality of a fabric, a human's flaws were inspected. The Slave Merchants Guild were masters at marketing their wares. A strong male slave would be sold for construction work or as a galley rower. But the real fortune lay in the women. Ordinary slaves were sold in the courtyard, but the chosen ones, the concubines, were kept in private chambers. For these girls, stolen from the steppes of Ukraine or the mountains of the Caucasus, this place was not the end of their lives, but strangely, perhaps the beginning. If she was lucky, and if the palace aga chose her, she could walk in through a door as a slave and walk out as a sultan ruling the empire, like Hurrem Sultan. This was the world's strangest lottery. You would either remain a servant in a mansion until you died, or become the wife of the most powerful man on earth, the Padishah. The difference was determined by beauty, intelligence, and a bit of luck. However, Ottoman slavery was different from the slavery in the Americas. It did not last forever. According to Islamic law, granting a slave their freedom manumission was one of the greatest pious acts. Most slaves would regain their freedom with a letter of liberation after serving for 7 or 9 years. Their former masters would even arrange marriages for them or help them open a shop. Some of those wealthy merchants you saw in the bazaar were once slaves sold in this very market. And the greatest irony of the system, the most powerful men of the empire, the grand viziers, the pashas, they were also the sultan's kul, his slaves. Through the dev-shirm system, children taken from Balkan villages would rise to the very peak of the state. In the Ottoman Empire, a slave could hold more power than a free-born Turkish peasant. Sometimes chains were not made of iron, but of gold. When the sun hits its zenith, life in the bazaar slows down. After all that noise and bargaining, these people need fuel. But in the 16th century, there is no luxury like a lunch break. It has to be fast, and it has to be filling. This is how the culture of the Esnaf Lokantaski, the tradesman's restaurant, was born. The menu is simple: soup, rice, and compote. Meat is a luxury. It is only seen during religious festivals or guild banquets. Here, the goal is not pleasure, but to stay standing until sunset. Prices are fixed, determined by the state. No one can raise prices on a whim or shrink portions. If they do, the punishment is severe. For those who cannot leave their shops, the food comes to them. One of the world's first fast foods was invented here: Simit, hot sesame-covered rings. Or that miraculous potion drunk to avoid fainting in the summer heat: Sherbet, tamarind, rose, licorice root. The Sherbet sellers, walking with massive brass pitchers on their backs, are like the bazaar's walking air conditioning system. But in the 1550s, something arrived in the bazaar that changed everything. A muddy, bitter, pitch-black water from Yemen. Coffee. At first, it was called the devil's drink and was banned, but the merchants loved this substance that banished sleep. Coffee houses were not just places to drink something. This was the bazaar's intelligence center. What is happening in the palace? Which ship sank? What will happen to the price of gold? All gossip, all secrets were whispered amidst the steam of this bitter coffee. Even some sultans would disguise themselves and infiltrate these coffee houses just to hear what the common people were saying. There were thousands of kinds of goods in the bazaar, but there was no single dollar or euro to buy them. The 16th century was a chaos of currencies. The Venetian ducat, the Spanish real, the Persian taman, and the Ottoman aki, they all passed across the same counter. So, how did a merchant know the true value of these coins? The answer, the Sarrafs. These men were walking currency exchange bureaus. To tell if a coin was fake, they didn't bite it. They threw it onto the marble counter and listened to the sound. Pure silver rings. Fake coin mixed with copper makes a dull thud. A Sarraf's ear was more accurate than the most precise scale. But the bazaar's greatest enemy was not thieves, but the clippers. Fraudsters would cut the edges of silver coins at a microscopic level, then put that coin back into circulation. They would melt down the accumulated silver dust to mint new, worthless coins. Over time, the coins shrank and their value plummeted. This was called taxes, the grandfather of inflation. At the end of the 16th century, the palace reduced the silver content in the currency. You might think the treasury was being clever, but this led to disaster. When the Janissaries, paid in debased coins, came to the bazaar, they found their money was worthless. Fabric that cost 1 pouch of gold yesterday now cost 2. The bazaar turned into chaos. Merchants refused to sell goods. Soldiers threatened to loot the shops. Historians called this the Great Flight, or the Economic Depression. When the pulse of the bazaar stopped, the heart of the empire skipped a beat. As you can see, to destroy an empire, you don't need cannons or rifles. Playing with the value of money is enough. In this labyrinth, the merchants did not fear thieves. Walls could stop thieves, but there was one monster that walls could not stop: fire. In the 16th century, the bazaar was packed with silk, cotton, and wood. A single spark could turn centuries of wealth into ash. That is why the rules were ruthless. Smoking? Forbidden. Lighting a lamp inside at night? Grounds for execution. There was no penalty for playing with fire, because the price would be paid by the entire city. The second fear after fire was a human. His name, the Muhtesib, the market inspector. He would appear suddenly. He would check the scales, measure the fabrics, and inspect the weight of the bread. You could not bargain with him. You could not offer him a bribe. If there was a trick in your scales, if you weighed less or sold rotten goods, the Muhtesib's justice would be served right then and there. No court, no waiting. For minor crimes, the punishment was the falaka. The stick coming down on the soles of the feet didn't just hurt the body, it broke the merchant's honor. But if the crime was major, if he had committed fraud, this is where the famous Turkish idiom was born: to have one's shoe thrown onto the roof. If a shoemaker sold rotten shoes, the Muhtesib would take that shoe and throw it onto the roof of the shop for everyone to see. This meant social execution. Everyone would see that shoe. That merchant would be expelled from the guild, his shop closed, and he would never do business in this bazaar again. His honor would rot along with that shoe on the roof. And finally, evening falls upon Istanbul. When the muezzin's voice echoes through the domes, the day is over for the bazaar. This is not an ordinary closing. This is an eviction. The whistles of the watchmen are heard. Customers, beggars, travelers. Everyone must be cleared out. Is anyone trying to hide inside? The guards check every corner, every chest. And then, that terrifying sound is heard. The closing of the gates. Iron bolts are drawn. Locks are turned 3 times. The keys are ceremoniously handed over to the chief watchman. Now, there is no return for anyone left inside. The place where thousands of people, smells, and sounds mingled just a few hours ago is now as silent as a graveyard. Millions in gold, tons of silk and spices, fall asleep in the darkness. Only the cats and the watchmen remain awake. This colossal machine stops, only to restart at dawn tomorrow, just as it has for centuries, and as it will for centuries more. The Grand Bazaar was the heart of the empire. But the brain of the empire was beating somewhere else, on that distant hill, Topkapi Palace, that forbidden city where merchants could not enter and where the rules were far more deadly. In the next episode, we will leave the bazaar and reach the walls of the palace. How did sultans protect themselves from poison? What was the unseen face of the harem? And whom did the mute executioners visit at night? You are in the place where history roars to life. This is Ottoman Times. Subscribe and wait for the gates to open.